The Home Tech Podcast is supported by you. To find out more, go to HomeTech.fm/support.
This is the Home Tech Podcast for Friday, May 8th from Denver, Colorado. I'm Jason Griffin.
And from sunny, hot, humid, awful Sarasota, Florida, I'm Seth Johnson.
You are joining us straight from the yard, like literally came running in and sat down at your desk.
Literally realized it was Wednesday as I was digging a hole. I found a big concrete chunk out in my yard, Jason. I don't know why anybody would put a big giant concrete chunk in someone's yard, but they did. And I was out there trying to drill it and bust it up with a small hammer. I'm going to have to get a bigger hammer, you know.
I feel like there has to be more to this story. Like you weren't, or is it literally just there's a big concrete block in your yard?
No, there's a big concrete block in my yard. I'll take a picture of it and
only
send it
in Florida.
Yeah, it looks like it was made. It's next to my driveway, so it was probably for like a car shed or something, a carport or something years ago. But I'm trying to do some work on my lawn and to move put some new grass down, and I was like,
oh, so this has been there.
Yes, it's been there.
Okay.
Now I'm trying to get rid of this thing.
Somehow a giant block of concrete just sort of materialized in your yard.
Florida is a magical place, Jason, but
which
not
would
that magical.
Be very Florida. Yeah. That's right.
Oh man.
All right. Well, we got a busy show here this week. We had Paulus Schoutsen on, who is the founder of Home Assistant. That was a really fun interview. So be sure to stay tuned for that. If you're not familiar with Home Assistant, they're a very robust DIY platform. And Seth, we talked about them years ago. I think this was back in one of our teen episodes, so early on in the show.
Yeah.
And they've been hard at it over the last several years. Really started out as very, very much a platform for people who wanted to kind of geek out hard and get in there and more for the, I guess, really like prosumer, high-level prosumer types. But they've really evolved over the years, and while they're still very much a platform that's great if you're somebody who really likes to get in and tinker, they've also evolved and have made it more approachable for those people like me who, as soon as you see a line of code, it's run for the hills. And it was really fun to talk to Paulus and just get to know a little bit about his backstory and some of the challenges that they've encountered over the years as they've grown and evolved.
Yeah, great conversation. Like you said, we caught them pretty early on. I think everybody was pretty early on back when it seemed like everybody was trying to start up a home automation platform based around Philips Hue lights, right? Like that seems to be where the origins of everything were, right? They got a Philips Hue lights. These are really cool. What's the next step? And for the vast majority of DIY guys out there, really wasn't a next step. So there at the time there were a lot of like little startups kicking in that were all DIY, and Home Assistant was just one of them. And I kind of dinged them hard for their setup process and configuration process that you'd have to learn YAML, which is a bane in my existence right now. So like I do not like YAML, and at the time did not like YAML. And so now completely different story, completely different product. They have iterated on that enough to where over time it's I think it's worth looking at. Like if it's still in the geeky side, but if you can basically get started with a couple of clicks of the mouse and pasting some command lines, and you're done. So good stuff.
So I'm curious about this. I don't want to spend too much more time because stay tuned and you'll hear a full interview with Home Assistant. But from a tech sort of Luddite, I'm always curious about things like when somebody refers to a language like YAML and says, I really don't like it. Like, what is it about YAML that you don't like? Like, I'm curious as a developer, like how does that work?
I think with YAML, it's the significant white space that I don't like. I'm not a fan of that, and that's going to upset. And I think that goes hand in hand with Python, which I also think
are these like fighting words for some programmers?
I don't know. It's just a matter of style. Significant white space means like the spaces between, like if you hit enter and you hit space 3 times, that counts, and that can be an error in your code. And it's made to make the code look beautiful as you look at it, and organized and structured in such a way. But to me, it doesn't meld with my mind very well. So I think that's why I don't like it. But it's used all over the place. Like AWS uses YAML heavily in their configurations. when you're doing stuff with that. So that's where I always ran into it. And then to have like an entire home automation system set up by hand coding YAML and hitting deploy, that just rubbed me all sorts of wrong ways. But now it seems like they have gotten around that, and they're using JSON, which makes a lot more sense. JSON is easier to read and understand, and it kind of like encloses itself where you have like an open parenthesis on one side and a closed parenthesis on the other, and like anybody can kind of look at that and understand that, you know, this is within that parentheses. That makes sense.
Right.
I'm simplifying it, but that's the idea.
No, sure. No, that makes sense. I've just always been kind of curious as somebody who's never really gotten into programming. I've tried a couple of times over the years to learn, and it just never stuck. But I know these are things that people have strong opinions about, and I'm always curious. Like,
it's literally all the same stuff. Like literally everything is the same, and it's only a matter of like your writing. Preference and writing style.
The right tool for the right job, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. Because YAML and JSON are kind of go hand in hand, and like I just kind of had the like light bulb go off. Like, oh yeah, they're using Python for Home Assistant. YAML goes hand in hand with that because it just kind of works and looks the same. So of course, a developer that is using Python is going to gravitate towards something that looks and works the same. So
got it. All right, Seth. Well, what do you say we jump into some home tech headlines?
Let's do it. After a 4-year hiatus, Crestron has announced that it once again be exhibiting at the CEDIA Expo. This year's, I'm putting quotation marks up, event is slated for September 8th through 12th, 2020 at the Colorado Convention Center in Denver, Colorado, of course. The last time Crestron had a booth at CEDIA Expo was in 2015, and I think oddly enough in Colorado, right? 2015? It sounds familiar.
I believe so. Yeah, I think so.
Way back.
I can't even remember how old I am half the time. So like dates, numbers, not good for me.
Yeah. So this is interesting. Someone thinks Crestron is, I mean, CEDIA is going to have a show.
I have a theory. This is a PR ploy.
Okay. Go on. Do tell.
Okay. So Crestron is looking at CEDIA going, there's no way this happens. But if we say we're going, then everybody will, we'll get all the goodwill and the credit, but we don't actually have to go.
They're just like on the phone with CEDIA right now, like, hey, the deposit check, that's in the mail right now. Don't worry.
It's in the mail. That's right.
We're going to push out our press releases, so we're good to go, right, guys? Oh, man.
That's right. No, I'm actually totally kidding. I do think John Clancy, I don't know him well. I have had a chance to chat with him a few times over the years. And, you know, we've talked about it on the show. Crestron pulled out of residential. Everyone was sort of speculating about Crestron pulling out of CEDIA, and does that mean they're done with residential? And John Clancy, who's a longtime residential integrator, came in and is now the vice president of residential. And I truly believe that that Crestron remains committed to the residential channel, and I do think that they're sincerely hoping. I'm totally joking about my conspiracy theory, but I do think that we won't belabor it. We talked about it at length last week, I believe. But yeah, huge question mark for me around whether or not CEDIA even happens this year. But whether it's this year or next year, I think it'll be great to have Crestron back.
I will echo that as well. Like, yeah, if they show up and there's no one there, I'm glad they'll be back at the CEDIA Expo. They're saying the company will have a 2,000 square foot booth at CEDIA. That's pretty much going to be the only thing on the floor. So they are going to have a captive audience.
That's right.
It's going to be the Crestron show.
Maybe that's the real theory. Is like they are truly planning to go, and they're hoping no one else does.
Right.
So that it's like the Crestron show.
Yeah. Well, hoping for the best and hoping that we see a show in Denver. Be nice to get back up there. Everybody loves Denver, of course. Jason, that's where you're out of, and it's become a very popular place to have the show. And really hoping that we have it this year, but it's like I know that the big question mark is if big companies are going to send these massive amounts of peoples to man their booth. So we'll be interested to see.
I'm slated to teach a workshop at CEDIA this year, and they sent out an email a couple of days ago that kind of surveying the educators and teachers of this year's workshops about, if it's a smaller size, are you still committed? Are you comfortable with virtual versus in person? So they're putting feelers out there, and doesn't surprise me. Of course they'd be doing that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting to see that come across, and only time will tell.
Right.
Moving on, networking provider Luxul is set to roll out its new ProWatch cloud management solution to dealers this month. ProWatch will enable integrators to remotely monitor and manage every device on their clients' networks, getting real-time notifications of status and quickly resolving issues. As the company notes, the free service to Luxul dealers also offers potential to be implemented as part of a remote management services contract in order to create a recurring revenue stream. So interesting to see this. This was previewed at CEDIA last fall, so we've known this is coming, but it sounds like they're getting ready to take it live.
Yep. We're a Luxul distributor, so I guess we've kind of known about this for a little bit too, and I think it only works on a couple of their routers, particularly a couple of their like newer devices is what it's going to go onto. But I think it's a great add-on feature that you get kind of out of the box, and that's pretty good. It's always good to get these remote monitoring things like right there on the edge device, meaning the router. Like you can't really get any closer to the internet to see kind of what's going on in the house. So it's good to see them actually getting on with the system and getting it set up and getting it deployed out to dealers and end users in the field.
Yeah. I think it's kind of to me, overwhelmingly good news. I think there's still plenty of room for companies to come in and provide these sorts of solutions, and lots of greenfield in terms of how integrators and home tech pros sort of incorporate these into their business strategy. But on the downside of it, there are a lot of disparate platforms. Well, fewer now that everything is sort of consolidating.
That was going to be my next joke, is that like next week, Snap AV will buy Luxul.
Yeah. That's right. So, there's still a lot of tools out there, and I think it's great. And I'm certainly not one of those people who thinks that everything needs to be under one roof. As long as you can sort of manage your deployments and keep it to a reasonable level. If you've got different tools for different jobs, then that all is it's okay. I think you do need to look to consolidate on the remote systems management to the extent that it makes sense for your business. So I don't know. It's I'll be interested to see more about this and sort of how widely it's adopted by Luxul dealers.
Right. Another tool in the toolbox. That's all it is.
That's right.
All right. Well, Josh.ai has announced that an $11 million Series A funding round. Since its founding in March 2015, the voice control platform has now raised a total of $22 million. Growing interest in hands-free interfaces for the home, along with the need for a privacy-based AI platform, has sparked investor interest. Josh.ai will use this capital to scale the team, increase its distribution network, and expand its hardware and software offerings with a focus on privacy. Jason, I got to say, I talked to a couple of dealers recently and just kind of asked them, kind of beating around the bush when talking shop and that kind of thing. I said, what do you guys, what's the next step for you guys? What are you looking at? And they're like, we like using the Alexa stuff, but it's just kind of like limiting. But we're really looking at Josh.ai. Like this came out of two different mouths, and I was surprised to hear it, like two different ends of the country. So, it looks like the interest turns into money at some point.
Yeah, no, it's great. Congrats to the team. We've watched them really, the company and Alex and his team really grab a foothold in the CEDIA space. I remember years ago when they were just coming onto the scene, and all of us were kind of like, who's Josh.ai? Like, what is this solution, and how is it different? How is it better? And I think they've done a solid job of differentiating and again, gaining a foothold in the industry. I think it's interesting to note in the story, which we pulled from Residential Systems here, says, with the funding, Josh.ai will double down on privacy, an aspect the company believes is critical for its clients. According to CEO Alex Capisulatro, we believe privacy is a basic human right, particularly when dealing with voice control technology in the most private spaces of a person's life. So I do think, they've carved out a nice niche for themselves, and I wish them continued success. I love what they've been up to.
Yep, and that privacy is a pretty good drum to beat on. They're in good company with Apple kind of beating the same thing into people's heads. When you're preaching the same thing as a billion-dollar company, a multi-billion-dollar company, I think you're in a good spot.
Yeah. And 11 million, is nothing to sneeze at.
No,
so
not at all.
It will be really interesting to see what they're able to do with that. Moving on from there, Google is set to introduce an Android TV streaming device in the coming months, a reimagined dongle with a new user interface that will put bigger emphasis on individual movies and TV shows as opposed to apps. This, according to multiple sources with knowledge of the company's plans, as reported by protocol.com. The company will likely extend its Nest brand to the new device, according to one of those sources.
Okay. So it's not going to be the Android TV anymore. It'll be Nest TV or Google TV.
Well, there was a related story this week in 9 to 5 Google that Google is planning to rebrand Android TV to Google TV. But according to this story, going back to the story from protocol.com about this new streaming device, it says Google will market the device under a distinct brand, separating it from third-party streaming devices based on Android TV, according to two sources with knowledge of the company's plans. So to sort of recap that real quickly, it sounds like this device they want to differentiate from what is today Android TV, and then separately Android TV may become Google TV. Confused yet?
I am almost caught up. Okay, so it's going to be different, but the same.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. The story goes on to talk about these stories. This was first reported apparently to 9 to 5 Google last month. Google's decision to produce a new streaming dongle shows its desire to compete more aggressively with Amazon and Roku in the streaming space.
Yeah, because in the past they were just like the dongle was Chromecast, right? So this is rumored to be
needed
more
like a phone.
Yeah, this is to be like an Apple TV or Roku Fire Stick.
That's
that
right.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference.
I don't know.
I think
not uncommon with Google and big companies like Google and Amazon to be a little bit confusing with so many different things they have going on. But the general sense is that, that I get is that this is going to be branded probably under the Nest brand. And again, you kind of got to separate in your head. There's the sort of the Chromecast model. There's the Android TV, which is sort of baked into TVs. And then this is like their standalone competitor like Roku and Apple TV,
right?
Is kind of the sense I get.
But it'll be like their Android TV, but not called Android TV because they don't want to call anything Android anymore. So they're going to call it Google TV or Nest TV,
or Nest.
Yeah, and it'll sell for $80. And I think probably be a pretty good device as well. I've seen the Android TV stuff. It looks pretty like on Sony TVs. It comes pre-installed on that. I've seen it. Looks pretty good. So I don't know, $80. Kind of premium if you put it up next to a Roku.
Yeah, so it's still unclear when Google will unveil or release the device. Speculation that they were going to release it at Google I/O next week, but that's of course been canceled because of COVID. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, devices that haven't been canceled. Jason, big news from Sonos this week. Bunch of new products. Well, new/updated products, I guess. Sonos introduced a trio of new hardware today, adding 3 new smart speakers to its lineup, including a Sonos Arc soundbar that includes Dolby Atmos support, as well as a new Sonos 5, replaces the Play 5, the next version of the third generation of the Sonos Sub. So if you have the Sonos Sub just looks the same, it's just a new version of it, I guess.
Yeah.
All these will require the new S2 app that Sonos announced it will release to customers starting on June 8th, which will introduce higher res audio, a new UI, and more. That should be fun.
Yeah, that's right. It says the new Sonos Arc will retail for $799, so $800. That one will set you back. The Sonos Sub is priced at $699 rather. Sonos 5 at $499. All 3 available for pre-order directly via the Sonos website. They'll start shipping and become available at retail globally beginning on June 10th.
I'm glad I kept my 35% off for trading in the single Sonos Connect that I bricked or whatever a couple months ago. I still got my 35% off coupon, so I might make some money on this, or not make money on it. I'll blow money on this. COVID-19 money.
That's right. Going broke, saving money.
Exactly.
Yeah, there was another story that I saw, just opening it up here. It had, some notes about the new This story was written right before it came out, so I don't know if any of what I'm about to say has been disproven, because again, this was sort of somewhat speculation. But it talked about some of the stuff. I think the new play bar to me, or the Arc, is the most interesting of the three. I think the changes to this, I know the changes to the sub were sort of minimal. New processor, better memory, things like that. Same with the 5. But the Arc is kind of a really a redesigned product. And there was, again, sorry, I'm looking to find, here we go. So it had, it has a sort of cylindrical design, not as boxy as the play bar. Some people were talking about if that was sort of less flexible. I didn't quite understand that, unless
you can mount the play bar, like you can set it down on a flat surface, or you can mount the play bar, you like flip it up and put where the base would be, you would put that on your wall, and you can mount that to the wall. So I guess it's like, and it would automatically detect which way you were going with it. And like I have mine underneath my TV, and it's mounted under the TV, so it's like it detects and rejiggers its speaker sound, so it comes out better. But this one looks like, I don't know, this one looks like you can mount it both. I saw it like on their hero images. It looked like you could mount it both ways.
Yeah. Supports Dolby Atmos. Sort of a minimalist design was another point. Physical buttons replaced for sort of touch sensitive surfaces. So anyways, go give it a look. It's, I think, much more sleek looking.
I think it looks way better. But
at $800, it'll be interesting to see how much adoption it gets. The soundbar space is just so competitive these days.
Yeah. I wanted to say the play bar was about that much, $699 or $799. Maybe it's only $699. The $100 extra is for the Dolby tax that you have to pay as a manufacturer. But yeah, no, I like how it looks. I think it looks a lot better than the current play bar that I have. And if I was in the market for this, I kind of have one TV in the house. I'd like to have something like this on. I might get this.
Yeah, it's not outrageous price wise. And the play bar was, it's just a cool like the Arc now and the play bar then, like the mix of Sonos music and then the ability to switch right over to your TV seamlessly. I remember when the play bar first came out, that was awesome. That was like a really great product, and it was so good for those clients who, weren't breaking the bank with a fully integrated, everything system, but they wanted a high-end audio experience. That play bar under the TV was a great solution. So, and you
got a Sonos system out of it too, because
that's right.
Comes in the box. I wonder. Now with the play bar, I did this a lot. I would hook up the back speakers through the amp. I suppose you could still do that with this thing. And I wonder. Yeah, because they're showing. Well, they're showing right here in their hero image on their website. They're showing the little Play Connect. I don't know, the little Play 1 speakers as the rear channel speakers for the Dolby Atmos setup. So obviously this is still kind of using like the 5.1 configuration, but then they're using like speakers that are aimed up on the Arc to bounce off the ceiling for the elevated sound, whatever you call it, on the Dolby Atmos.
Right.
So they're not like adding more speakers to the system. It doesn't look like.
Yeah. So anyways, it looks like a neat product. I'm just sort of scrolling through some of the specs here. Sonos Arc specs: connection, HDMI, optical, and Ethernet. Does support the audio return channel, Dolby Atmos, AirPlay 2 it's got as well. So there you go. Pretty neat looking product.
Yep. I don't know. Might get one. Don't know.
Got some money burning a hole in your pocket?
No, it just replaced my air conditioner, so definitely something's burning.
So, definitively no.
Yeah, I didn't.
That's right. All right. Well, all the links and topics we've discussed on this episode can be found in our show notes at HomeTech.fm/302. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. We'll send you weekly show reminders and other occasional updates about all the great things going on here in the world of home tech.
And don't forget that you can join us live in the chat room Wednesday, starting sometime between 7 and 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Find out more at HomeTech.fm/live. And you can get in the chat room and remind me that CEDIA 2015 was in Texas. Thank you, Greg.
Oh, that's right. Dallas.
Little callback.
Block that out of my memory.
Exactly. Dallas is just like, I don't think I know. It was such a bad location. It's like you think Dallas, you're like, oh, I'm going to go over to Daily Plaza and see that. Depressing. No, I guess I'm not going to do that. Like, and it's not
I don't
cool.
know. I'm not trying to knock Dallas, but
I am.
Okay, good.
I'm from Texas. I can do this.
Okay, exactly. Yeah, you get a pass on that. I just, they're up against some stiff competition in Denver and San Diego.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think between those two towns, I'm more of a beach person, and the San Diego weather was definitely more in line with what I'm used to. But I will put up with Denver. I mean, it's very nice there. Not rainy. Your rain is cold, Jason. Your rain is very cold.
Well, September's a wild month here in terms of weather, because I mean it can literally be like, mid 70s and gorgeous, or it can be like, rainy and cold.
Yeah, I didn't like that part, but everything else was fine. I mean, just great. Good food, plenty of things to do.
Oh, plenty of that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, busy news week, but let's go ahead now and wrap that up and jump in without any further ado to our interview. Once again, we had Paulus Schoutsen on. He is the founder of Home Assistant, and we hope you enjoy. Hey, Paulus, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. I know we've been trying to get this lined up for quite a while, and we look forward to jumping in and learning more about your product and service and everything that you guys have going on there in the world of the Home Assistant. But before we do that, why don't you give our listeners just a quick personal introduction, say hi, talk about a little bit of your background and sort of what brought you to where you are today in the smart home.
Cool, yeah. So my name is Paulus Schoutsen. I'm the founder of Home Assistant. Home Assistant is an open source home automation project that's been 6.5 years old by now. I started on it back in the days because I got like a Philips Hue that just got released and I had it at home. And I was like, well, great, I can use an app, but I wanted to see if I could like hack the API and just control it from my computer. I did so, and then of course I was like, now what, right? I want to do something with it. So start playing like, okay, what if I just like have the lights turned on at sunset? Pulled in like the time when the sun was setting at my location. Went great. Started like, then I realized, well, now the lights are being turned on when no one is home too. And so then I was like, well, now I need to fix that. So I needed to have presence detection. And, that's like how 6.5 years kind of ago, Home Assistant started rolling initially, right? This is like way before it was like open source. It was just like a small script in my home.
Cool. So one thing sort of led to another. It sounds like if we just maybe back up half a step, talk about, it sounds like you were maybe into programming
Yes.
before you got into the smart home. Talk about a little bit of that background.
Right. So I went to school in the Netherlands, where I'm from. And in the Netherlands, I studied like business information technology. It's kind of like a business intelligence focused like major. And so through that, I was doing my master thesis in San Diego, here in America, at the San Diego Supercomputer Center. And after I finished school, I ended up like working there as well for a bit. And then I realized that business intelligence and all that stuff is not really for me. Like it's a lot of like plumbing. You're just like moving data around, like those cool, like, oh, look what we learned from like analyzing this data. It takes months, if not like a year, to just get it all set up, and then it keeps breaking and stuff. So it was not fast enough to be satisfaction for me. And so, I just quickly after that, I joined like a software company, and that's where I was always programming as well. So it was not like a crazy jump for me. And right there, that's where I learned really like just, how to do development, all the development best practices, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and like just writing tests, the importance of writing tests, and like code quality wise, these kind of stuff. And at the end of my time in the Supercomputer Center, that's where I started like writing the scripts that later became like known as Home Assistant. And, it just got better and better over time. And so, yeah, I've been like, I was a programmer at this software engineer, it's called, at Appfolio for 4 years. And then 2.5 years ago, I made the jump to Ubiquity. That's a company known for the Unify routers and stuff. They they paid me for a year to work on the core of Home Assistant, actually. So just do open source work. And they ended that like last year, April, like a year ago, pretty much. And since then, I have my own company working on Home Assistant as well. So now I'm just full-time, and I'm just, sitting in my home office, which, I mean, it's just the spare bedroom, I guess. But
yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, you got a sympathetic audience here for sure. So really cool. I would love to jump into a little bit more of the early days before we get into kind of what's going on now. We've got a pretty entrepreneurial audience, a lot of small business owners, and I'd love to hear just a little bit about some of that early story and how, again, you guys have evolved a lot, and we'll get to some of that more recent evolution. But in the early days when this was going from, like you said, just kind of a script on your computer in your bedroom to that initial sort of open source iteration, talk about that journey a little bit and some of the challenges that you encountered there.
Right. Well, I mean, we encountered a lot of challenges. I think that the early on was like, I had no experience with open source, right? So like open source means like you go to GitHub, which is the place where most of the open source code in the world lives. And, you put your code out there and other people can see it. And so I had no experience with it. And I was really like, when I put something up there, everybody's going to judge me, right? Everybody's going to look at my code. But the truth is, like, you publish something online, nobody sees it. Like, GitHub is so big, nobody's just going to random code and like criticizing whatever you put up there, right? So I put out a Home Assistant and I started just kind of like working at it. And I was mainly using just GitHub as to do version control and as a backup for my own scripts. Like nobody really knew about it, right? Nobody was really using it. And I was hanging out in the home automation subreddit. And sometimes people would ask like problems, and I was like, well, this is how I solved it in my script. And, some people kind of like looked into it. One or two people started using it, but like, not so much. I'm also, besides like this, Home Assistant is written in Python. Python is a language for, data science and for backend, like website development in the backend, but not so much what runs in your browser, the front end, like how it looks. And so at some point, I think Google released Material Design, and this was a new design language, and they released with it a bunch of components, which is that like implemented all of Material Design right off the bat. And so I was able to just take those components, like create a UI that looked pretty good because it was, of course, the Material Design, which was all pretty innovative at that point. And all of a sudden, Home Assistant had a pretty slick looking UI, and that's when we got on Hacker News. And after that, it's kind of like, kept going and going, because after that, like, you just got such a surge in just people looking at the project, knowing about the project, using the project, like contributing to the project, these kind of things. But I mean, this, of course, just being on Hacker News is not going to guarantee you like you get a lot of eyes, but it doesn't mean that people stick. And so, when we look at like how we did like community building, is that initially it was just GitHub issues. Like, hey, you have a bug report, like put it in here, and then that's it. But what I realized is that you cannot build a community like that. Like nobody's gonna put like a fun conversation or what's like the best device to work with this, or there's no conversation going. It's just bug reports, acknowledgements, and then maybe fixes or whatever. And so I added like an email list, because that's what I was like, oh, that's kind of like a good way to communicate. But I realized that with email, we still had a very high barrier, right? Like to send an email, there's like only one channel, which is the email list. There's no topics, there's no channels, whatever, chat rooms. And so there was still too high of a barrier of like, emailing and community building. Of course, like, I can only see this in hindsight, right? Like when I was at that point in time, I didn't know better. I was like, oh, this is going pretty well. And with our email list, at some point we hit like this milestone where somebody asked a question and somebody else answered it, right? It was not just me anymore. It was like somebody else was helping out, which I thought was a pretty big milestone. And then we moved to a chat application called Gitter. And Gitter was like a chat application that was all, it's still around. GitLab acquired it, but it was based around your repositories. So every repository gets like a chat room. And the application just didn't evolve as fast. So eventually we moved to Discord. So that's where we are still right now. We have a big server and like lots of channels and bots and moderators and like, I mean, this is where the community lives right now. And like the email list doesn't exist anymore. We still have the forums. The forums are still alive and kicking. I think, there's a preference between our community. Some people like the forums, some people like the chat. The forum software is really evolving nowadays that it's almost like chat, right? Like you can see when people are typing, you can like, the topics, direct messages kind of all look the same. So you don't, it's sometimes unclear. And so it's kind of cool. People do whatever they want. It's, forums have the benefit that you end up in Google if like somebody offers a solution, of course, right? To like find problems. I think that's something we lack in our chat. But overall, I mean, the community has just been growing on these two channels like a lot. And now, I mean, nowadays, we have YouTubers, there's a Home Assistant podcast, there's like just people creating blog posts all the time. There's like a very active Facebook group. The Home Assistant subreddit is pretty active. Like there's all these channels now. It's like, and now it just kind of keeps going. And so we don't really, we don't really add new channels lately anymore. Now it's just these channels itself keep growing, and until some new social media platform evolves or something like a TikTok channel or something, but I doubt it.
So it's fair to say it's a pretty, at this point, Home Assistant is a pretty community driven product at this point.
Yes. Yeah. So, well, it is definitely community driven. It is, but there is the company now. Like, so I started a company called Nabukasa, and this company doesn't, what Nabukasa does is that it offers a service on top of Home Assistant. So, Home Assistant is all local. All your data is local. All the home automation, everything runs local. It communicates with clouds like Nest or Ecobee to pull in data, but then all the automations, everything processes local. And, you can run Home Assistant without being connected to the internet at all. But it has the problem that if you're away from home, how do you check in with your home, right? Because like Home Assistant does like home control, which, probably you want to be home when you want to control your home. You want to do home monitoring. But then part of monitoring is if you have a leak and you get a notification while you're away, you want to check in on your home. And so you need to be able to access Home Assistant while away from home. And so this was a problem that, the technical folks will be like, oh, I just open a port, I get like a Let's Encrypt certificate and everybody can access it. But the less technical folks they struggle with that. So I started a company that offers a very easy service that offers an end-to-end encrypted connection while you're away from home to control Home Assistant.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I will say, so we looked at, I would say very early on in our podcast, we looked at some of the goings on. There's an episode, I want to say it's like in the teens or 20s. It's very early. And we looked at like what was going on in the DIY space. Because Jason and I both have a background coming from the, what do you call professional side, pro-consumer side, where, the Crestrons or the Control 4s, that kind of thing. And those products 5 years ago were getting their, I would say they had a pretty solid footing as far as they were very mature products. Crestron, especially Control 4 was definitely getting there. Elan, a lot of these other companies that Jason and I deal with every day definitely had a solid footing. They had hundreds of engineers or, dozens of engineers. and then we look over and we say, well, what's going on the DIY side? And there was quite a bit, and there's still there is. And Home Assistant was definitely one of the more popular ones. And when I looked into it, there was I would say the vast majority of the DIY product that was out there was very, you definitely had to be a technical person to spin up an instance of Home Assistants, for example, and the YAML. I know we're going to get to that probably, right? I actually was talking to Jason last night, and I said I know I gave them a pretty tough review because of the YAML, and then I looked and literally opened the website yesterday when we were talking about this and looked at the post, the future YAML. So like I read that and I'm like, okay, I knew you would get there, and it took you a while to get there, but you're there, and so like that's great news. But I mean, go ahead and talk about that, because coming from a programmer's background, which and a technical person's background, and putting something like this in front of a person that is in your house that may not be technically oriented. If something goes wrong, what do I do? That kind of thing. Like where do you see, I guess, what have you done over time to ensure that a non-technical person could get involved with Home Assistant? And I guess go on to that, like what you'll be doing in the future to kind of being able to allow people to use Home Assistant who, have setting up the Hue light is probably as far as they got. They weren't thinking beyond that.
Right. No, that's a good question. So back when, like nowadays, I get a salary through my company, right? So it's no longer a job. Like I used to run Home Assistant like before work, in the mornings I would check my notifications, after work, weekends, like, my whole weekend blocked out. I didn't have any kids yet. I could just, hack on it.
It changes everything.
It changes everything. Yes. But this was great. But I always said that, like, I'm not going to build a UI. So first of all, there's two parts to the UI of like a home automation system, right? You have people that want to administer the system, that they want to like configure devices, they want to configure automations, scenes, all that stuff. And then there's users that consume the interfaces that are built for like different rooms or whatever you name it. And so while we were open source, I always said, I don't want to build any UI for people that are for administration, because administration UI is a pain to build. We have around 1,500 different integrations of like products all over. And just the idea of like to build a UI for all that stuff was like, this is not going to work. And so I always said, as long as I'm not getting paid, I'm not going to build the administration UI. There's no fun in building UI, right? There's no fun in like, there's a lot of gotchas and like everything needs to be usable, user-friendly, and it's sometimes challenging. And so we made sure that like the UI for controls, that looked very snappy. That was like with the material design, what I described earlier, and it was like, that always looked pretty good. But then like things changed, right? When Ubiquiti started paying me, and later then Nabukasa started paying me. And so now we've been like migrating slowly and like making more administrative UI. And, the two, I mean, if I summarize the last 2 years, right, we use the slogan like, make it easier. That has been like, everything we do has been to make it easier to use. Because initially, you had to like write text files. YAML is the configuration format we use. And, YAML, you would have to like restart Home Assistant to, whenever you made a change. And it was like, Z-Wave network would take like a minute to get up after restart. And you had to test your automation. Just iterating on your automations was a pain. And, we wanted to see, we can do this better. And so we started making things easier bit by bit, where you want to be able to do it in the UI, but we also have a big crowd that loves the YAML. And one of the reasons why people love their text file format is because it's easy to share. So there's a lot of GitHub repositories out there where people share their Home Assistant configuration. People are browsing Home Assistant configurations of one another for inspiration. They're copy-pasting automations into their system, these kind of things. And, that's something also that, like, if you talk about community building, allowing the community to easily share stuff is something that's very important. And I think definitely has helped in, like, driving our community. However, I also think that, it's kind of silly that we are all spending so much time and, like, effort into building home automation software if we focus on such like a subset of like the people, right? It would be great if people that are like semi-technical can also start using Home Assistant. And so Home Assistant originally was just a Python application. So it's just the instructions were very technical. It's like install Python, like on a Raspberry Pi. And then once you have to log into the terminal and then create a virtual environment, install the Python package and then run it. Good luck. There you are. But a couple of years ago, what changed is that we launched our own operating system. And it's not like we run operating system from scratch. It's like, no, we cherry pick like parts of like Linux and Docker, and we build out a system that turns a Raspberry Pi or an Intel NUC, we have a few other supported platforms that are less well known, into a system that behaves like an off-the-shelf home automation hub. So you can do updates. If an update fails, it will roll back. All happens through the UI. Like Home Assistant has a new panel to system administration panel where you can, update the operating system itself. We will make sure that it remains secure. We will make, security updates get pushed. updates are easily accessible. And because it's like based on Docker, which is like, you can run containers, which is like an easy format of packaging up applications on Linux. People also started adding like containers, or in our world is now called add-ons, for other services. So for example, if you want to install Plex or Samba or like AdGuard for app blocking, these things, or an MQTT broker for home automation space, all these things are now one click to be installed in Home Assistant. Then it's just installed as a service next to Home Assistant on your machine, and it will integrate flawless into Home Assistant. Like the moment you set up an MQTT broker, Home Assistant will say, hey, I'm going to connect to your MQTT broker. Now you have MQTT set up, and then you can log into the MQTT broker with your Home Assistant credentials. So all of a sudden, you don't even need to like do user management. You can still do that in Home Assistant. And all these steps is just to like make it easier. Because when you just put out like tutorials with terminal commands and these kind of things, like people are pretty good at following a tutorial. They can go line by line and they can do the most advanced setups. But then when anything breaks, if any output is not the same, they're stuck.
It's over. Yeah.
Yeah, it's over. And then people come to us. It's like they go in the chat. It's like, well, I decided that I'm just going to do it on this way. And now it doesn't work. Can you help me? It's like, no. Like, so it became like a big support burden. And I think in our community, just to try to reduce these support burdens, we've been really like saying, okay, this is how we suggest you install Home Assistant. If you're more adventurous, you can like do like you can install the Python application. We just recently did a rebranding. So back in the days, Home Assistant was our Python application. Now Home Assistant is our operating system with our Python application in it, like the whole
package. So you've been normalizing and simplifying the architecture that you're pushing out there to help that support burden. I'm sure we would probably talk about that a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like community support is a big part of the operation too.
So the nice thing about Home Assistant, if you compare it to like a Crestron or a Control 4, is that we're open source. We're built by volunteers. We do like a release every 3 weeks, and we have around 80 people contributing code to it every 3 weeks. And these people are, around the world. These are just people at home. Just have these devices, and they look at how these devices work, and they add this to Home Assistant or improve it or build upon the work of others. And what it means is that we don't, where like a Control 4, all their engineers in-house, they are building the plugins for the different systems. So you rely on Control 4 to have all the time to like, integrate something. With Home Assistant, it's the other way around. Somebody has the product, they contribute it. Sometimes it's the vendor itself that they will spend resources on making the integration solid. A lot of times these are startups, of course, where like they're building some certain project and they wanted to have it like integrated well into Home Assistant because they don't want to do all the home automation part, but they want to be able to offer that to whatever system the other users already use. And that's how we've got so many integrations. And, we have a lot of old stuff that is like, where sometimes the services that are online have been turned off and these devices could maybe be flashed with some other firmware or something and still to be like revived. And this is where, we don't discriminate. We're not going to say, we're not going to support this old X10 format because, we need to like do some support on it. It's like, no, I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But if a developer wants to make it work, then go for it.
Right. Yeah. No, there are definitely some clear benefits to that model. This is all really interesting stuff. I'd love to zoom out a little bit and start to look at the product a little bit more from the outside in, so to speak. So from an end user's perspective, or maybe more accurately from a potential end user's perspective, if you have, we've got a lot of professionals in the audience, but we've also got a lot of sort of higher end consumer, prosumer folks who are, on the more advanced side of the consumer spectrum in terms of comfort and proficiency with technology. Talk a little bit about, because it sounds like the platform has evolved tremendously over the years. And so talk about sort of the state of Home Assistant today and kind of who in your mind is kind of an ideal consumer or end user for this product. If somebody's sort of sitting out there listening to this and wondering, okay, is this product right for me? Is this the right platform that I want to run my home on?
Right.
Talk about some of the considerations there.
So right now, I think we've been working on making it easier, for the last 2 years. And I think somewhere last year, at the end of last year, we got to a point where you no longer need to touch any YAML file if you want to use a subset of Home Assistant. So if you want to go super advanced, you will still need like the YAML format to set up certain integrations, and like maybe, if you want to have super advanced automations, you have to write your own Python scripts, because everything is possible if you want to like program it. But if you just want to use like, we call it like standard mode and advanced mode. And so in standard mode, you can do everything through the UI. You can build basic automations. You can like configure over 100 integrations. Now, I don't know the exact count, that have already been converted to our new format. And so if you are, I don't think you need to be like a rocket scientist anymore to use Home Assistant. But there's a but. The only problem right now is that to use Home Assistant, to install it is the biggest hurdle. Because right now, to get started with Home Assistant, for example, if you don't have anything in your house, you need to buy a Raspberry Pi, buy an SD card to run, because that's how the Raspberry Pi like boots our operating system. You need to download our operating system, and you need to flash it to the SD card. And that's kind of right now the biggest technical hurdle, I think, for people to get started. And that's something we're going to look at as well, to see if we can make that even easier.
But a similar process to setting up a Raspberry Pi anyway, which is pretty popular. I mean,
it is. But so my goal, my target audience, right, when I like think of like who do I want to be able to use the product, is, for example, I have a non-technical friend, or my parents, or I want these people to be almost as easy as like just an off-the-shelf product, right? We need to be able to get there. And we're getting really close, and I think just the installation hurdle is right now the toughest. But like once you have it installed and you open up the portal, you go through like an onboarding flow nowadays to set up your username, your password, set your location, so we can determine when your sun is setting. Then like we will scan your whole network, and we'll say, hey, we found like a Roku, we found like a Chromecast, we found your Sonos or Philips Hue, you name it, right? And then you just click through it, you set it all up, and then when you go to the main screen, everything is already there.
Yeah, it looks way different from when we looked at it, 5 years ago. It's really good.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's a great offering if you're into the smart home and you like to maybe spend a little bit of time tinkering and playing around. And a lot of people really enjoy that. They find that experience fun. But I love, to me, it's a very interesting story, because really the big trend and the typical thing you see is companies coming to market right out of the gate, trying to make a product that works for everyone and trying to make it extremely consumer friendly right out of the gate. And you guys, in a sense, almost, I would say, perhaps inadvertently, came at it from the exact opposite angle, in that you started with a very robust product that was designed for people who really wanted to get under the hood and tinker. And now you're evolving and building upon that really solid foundation and community model to get closer to something that is better maybe just for the average person who wants to get into the smart home and have some fun doing it themselves. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And I think, if we look at the long run, if we ever want to offer like a consumer product, is that I'm very wary of that, because I see, when you look at like the more, standard home automation controllers out there, like, Wink, which probably is already dead by the time this airs, or SmartThings. It's, those companies, they sell you like a $70 hub. And then the problem is that as a home automation hub, we are the control interface to your lights. So that means if your lights break, then Home Assistant doesn't work, right? You don't think that maybe your lights are broken. You're going to say Home Assistant doesn't work. So these people are going to want to have to call someone, or they want to email someone, or they want to they want to go to a support desk saying my lights don't work. Because if you go to the higher end, people will have their home automation installers, and they'll call those, and they bill hourly, and it's all fine, right? But the people that just, the normal folks out there that like, the real big audience that just want to do home automation, it's just a lot more tough to provide like a service for them that like can, match that, like, match that experience and help them out if they get stuck. And, even, I always wonder how like Google does it, where they pretty much give you a free Google Home Mini, and then like,
yeah,
if it doesn't work, then what?
Well, yeah, billions and billions of dollars and, subsidizing from other arms of the business help. But yeah, no, it's great. It's a great point. And I think there's a really interesting thread there just to think about in terms of, we've talked about it on the show. I mean, this is nothing unique to us. Everybody's sort of scratching their head right now and trying to figure out, how does that work? Like if you're out there selling a $70 home automation hub, and maybe you don't have it tied to any sort of ongoing monthly fee, is that a sustainable model? And if it's not, which is a very reasonable thing to assume, what does that mean ultimately for the user of that product in the long run? And so I think there's a really interesting just question to be asked there about, is open source a better model for that sort of segment of the market, for people who are willing to go into it eyes wide open and understand that, yeah, there's not a 24/7 support line that I can call, but there is a huge community of other people using it,
right,
who can help me out. So that's really interesting. That's cool. We are running up against our time, and I do want to make sure that we have a minute to talk about something cool that I saw when I was researching and getting ready for this interview, and would love to hear a little bit more about what it is your data science portal. Talk about that a little bit.
Right. So something that I haven't even really touched about in this interview is that, like, with Home Assistant, all your data is local, right? No data will ever leave your home. So you have full control over your data, and it's stored on your device. And with Home Assistant, like, Home Assistant exists because a lot of home automation providers are building these silos of, like, inside their clouds or their ecosystems, their devices work and their data lives, but the data never goes to other silos. I mean, sometimes some people integrate with if this then that, which is like a cloud system that like can tap into all these different systems, but you don't have access to that data yourself. And so with Home Assistant, we have all that stuff local. And so instead of saying, hey, this is our format, like stay away, we're like, no, this is how we store your data, and this is how you can actually learn from it. And so we have a data science portal, and in the data science portal, we describe exactly the database tables, which data we're storing, and then we have made sure that we store enough data to do proper machine learning on it. So the goal was, because we haven't published much like machine learning like models on it. We've done like some small example trainings and stuff on it. But we know like which user turned on a light, or like which user triggered a script, and which script then turns on like 5 lights. Then we know this user is like turning on these lights, and every state change and every event that is happening inside Home Assistant, because Home Assistant is an event-driven system, is all recorded. So you can replay history, and it also means that you can, at any point in time, completely see how your house looked. So if you want to say yesterday at 2 p.m., which sensors, like what was the temperature, was the door open, was the window open, you can exactly like just, look in the data and see what the state of your house was. And then, you can start doing learning. So, we have a Jupyter notebook add-on for Home Assistant. So Jupyter is a data science, kind of Google Docs, I guess, experience. So you have a website that has Python in it, but you can also write like documentation, like Markdown, like kind of a Word document around it. And then these Python scripts can read your database and then print out like results. And so we have a Jupyter notebook as an add-on with like an example notebook, so people can just run our example scripts, and like it automatically, because it's like an add-on in the Home Assistant, it will automatically connect to your database. So you don't even need to like, to get started with this, you don't even need to set up anything really like technical. You just install it through the UI. And then once you run it, you can, for example, see, what are the most, like, what are the devices I interact most with in the morning or in the afternoon or at night? And this is, for example, something that we eventually also plan to integrate into Home Assistant itself. For example, when we want to suggest automations. So, for example, hey, we notice that every time you come home, you turn on these lights. You want to do that automatically? Yes or no? Check this box or something like this.
And this is all done locally without having to go to Google and ask them how to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. What I was going to say is what makes this so cool. And I'm just sitting here as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about, man, like this would be really eye-opening to go in and look at, and you can start to see really, you get a sense for the level of sort of monitoring and intelligence that these big companies who aren't privacy focused are gathering currently from your home. And you can start to see some of the ways that maybe you're not super comfortable with them knowing these sorts of things. And so it's cool. I love that you guys are doing that. And I think, it sounds like something that could really pave the way for a lot of cool stuff in the future. And right now, it sounds like starting to scratch the surface of what users can do with better data in their homes. So that's really neat. Cool. Well, this has been really a jam-packed conversation here. I definitely have learned a lot more about Home Assistant, and I'm almost thinking I need to get one of these in my home to start playing around. So a lot of fun learning about this. As we run up against our time here, Paulus, what would you say is next? What's kind of the thing that you're most excited about in terms of the future for Home Assistant?
I mean, we're going to continue making things easier. We've been really redesigning our whole configuration screen. I mean, this is like what's currently on my mind, right? But we've been working with Stanford on making a privacy-focused voice assistant. So they had a privacy-focused voice assistant that we've integrated with Home Assistant, and it's still early stage, but we're trying to improve this. And so one of the things that we want to offer is like, hey, turn this Raspberry Pi with a microphone and a speaker into a local privacy-focused Google Home kind of alternative.
Right. This is the Almond project. I think I saw in your State of the Union. It's on your website there on the front, but yeah.
Yeah. But that's something that I want to spend more time on because I think it's important. I think we all get these voice assistants and microphones in our houses, and we send all this data to the cloud. And I think that, there needs to be a solid alternative. And I think we're in the right spot together with Stanford to provide that.
Excellent. Well, Paulus, thank you very much for your time coming on and telling us a little bit about Home Assistant, all the stuff we didn't know about it. And I'm getting pretty excited about this one now because
that's cool.
Looking back at what I was thinking 5 years ago, I could, a lot of these you could see the legs on them and see that they had a future. They may still be out there and people may be still tinkering around with them, but by far and away the one that I hear, maybe it's because you're embedded there in the Reddit forums, but the one I hear the most about is Home Assistant. And you guys were actually at CEDIA this last year so I got to meet you there and talk to you a little bit. This is really taken off, and I want to say congratulations because this is really cool to see how far you've come.
Thank you.
But again, thank you for your time. We appreciate you coming on Home Tech and talking a little bit about Home Assistant today.
Yeah, Paulus, we really appreciate it. And right here, as we wrap up, if anyone is listening and wanted to connect with you to maybe ask a follow-up question or learn more about the product, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Well, the best thing is to, on our website, home-assistant.io, there's links to our community to get onto our forums and our chat, which is the best place to get started, asking questions. That's also where I hang out. So
cool.
And one last thing, we talked a lot about Raspberry Pis, but if people have a Synology or an Unraid NAS at home, there's actually packages available to install Home Assistant Core. You don't get the full experience with all the add-ons, but just the core, just to play with it. That's a good start if you already have those systems at home.
Cool. Yeah, glad you mentioned that. Good to know. All right, Paulus. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Take care.
Have a good day.
That was a pretty good interview with Paulus, and I want to thank him again for coming on the show. I learned a lot more about it was nice to get caught up on the platform and learn more about it and see, kind of understand what their goal is and kind of see what they're looking at on the horizon, where their goals are to go with the product. So
yeah,
it's nice to see that they've been iterating and improving and where they are from where they were 5 years ago.
Definitely.
They've come a long way.
I really enjoyed too how we got a little more techie in this conversation than we have in the past, and I enjoyed really kind of diving in under the hood and talking about some of the technology underneath it, and sort of listen to you guys talk as a couple of developers. It was really interesting for me. That's not a world that I live in directly. I'm certainly around people who develop consistently, and I enjoyed that aspect of the conversation. But I agree with you. It was cool to see how far they've come and learn a little bit of the personal backstory as well in terms of some of their trials and tribulations along the way.
Nothing in the mailbag, But I got a small pick of the week. I ran across this last week, and I don't know if you have ever had to deal with a program called Vizio in your time as a dealer.
How much time do you got?
I used to do a lot of work in Vizio. I used to do a lot of drawings in Vizio, and I liked it ish. I mean, it was a necessary evil, right? Like it was
For sure.
It was there.
I got to be fair to Vizio because part of my sigh that you heard there was working at a time for an integrator who will remain nameless that refused to upgrade us from like this really old version. So I think, it was like whatever year it was, we were working on a version that was like, 3 or 4 versions old or something like that. And that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can understand that. The licensing model of Microsoft products is not very good.
Yeah.
Although it's
it
got
had
a little
me
bit
pining for, just cloud-based, like automatically updating type of thing. But anyways, it did its job.
You're in luck with the cloud-based, at least. I ran across this thing called SmartDraw, smartdraw.com. It's a kind of a Vizio competitor, and I was looking for a way to kind of take some Vizio floor plans that I had drawn up and move them into this, kind of manipulate them and bring them back out in a format that I can kind of put into some marketing stuff that for some stuff we're working on at Blackwire. And I ran across this program because I didn't want to obviously download Vizio or Microsoft anything at this point. I mean, I use the coding stuff that they have, but I don't have Windows. So like this seemed like a really good-ish alternative to Vizio. Like it does most everything that you would need to do in Vizio. And it seems to do it pretty well. It's all online though. Like it doesn't take that means it'll work on a Mac, it'll work on Windows, and work on whatever. It just kind of loads up in the browser and works there. Kind of cool.
Yeah, no, this looks it looks nice. I'm looking at the website. Trusted by millions of users, so it appears it's pretty well established. Looking at pricing, so it looks like it's kind of an annual pricing model.
Yeah, annual. So
as low as $3,000 a year.
No. It's about $10 a month.
Okay, yeah,
I don't know what page you're on. You must be on the enterprise page.
I am. Yeah. What's the difference? So enterprise. Okay, I was like, wow, sounds really expensive. So enterprise is site license. So that's probably if you have like a giant company and you need a ton of people on it.
Oh yeah. You're on the wrong page. If you go back to the main page at SmartDraw, there's like a little there's a buy button up at the menu there. If you click that, it'll bring you to the single user price of $9.95 a month.
Okay, that's a little more palatable.
It's got a ton of symbols in it. It's got a ton of like templates that you can kind of start off with, which was kind of nice. I kind of searched through and found a couple of things that I needed. But one of the things that it has in there is the ability to like load in old Vizio symbols that I may have. So you can like bring in Vizio drawings
cool.
and it'll load those in and decode them, do its magic, and put them on your computer screen.
What's the Vizio? Is it templates?
Stencils? Yes. I don't know if you were hanging out in the hub last week, but I was sharing my stencil set from probably 2011, 2012, and then 2014.
I did see that.
So yeah, I had a pretty extensive Control 4 stencil set that I used for drawings, mostly like not like what I didn't like doing what most people did with the D-Tools type drawings where you were doing like floor plans and that kind of thing. This was more meant for marketing type, like it was front facing, it was client facing, but it was more for like to explain where things would go. You would have this nice little drawing, but I wasn't wiring up racks or anything, but I can see where a lot of guys kind of like doing that, like having a visual image where this wire goes from here to here.
Right.
I just never got into that.
Yeah. Rashid's in the chat room. I use Lucid Chart. That's a good one. I've definitely used that as well. And Jonathan look what I did while you were discussing, and he drew what is this?
It's a heart.
It's the human heart.
Yes. Thank you, doctor.
Awesome.
Wait a minute. That's not the atrial valve.
Yeah, this is definitely wrong. All wrong.
Wrong.
Very cool. All right. Well, good pick of the week. I am a total geek for software and stuff like this. Love it.
Yep. Good stuff.
All right. Well, if you have any feedback, questions, comments, picks of the week, or ideas for a show topic or guest, give us a shout. Our email address is feedback@HomeTech.fm, or visit HomeTech.fm/feedback and fill out the online form.
And we want to give a big thank you to everyone who supports the show, but especially those who are able to financially support the show through our Patreon page. If you don't know about our Patreon page, head on over to HomeTech.fm/support to learn how you can support HomeTech for as little as $1 a month. Any pledge over $5 a month gets you a big shout out on the show, but every pledge gets you an invite to our private Slack chat, The Hub, where you and other supporters of the show can gather every day for inside baseball conversations about Vizio stencils.
That's right.
That's all we're talking about from now on, Vizio stencils.
That's right. And I'm going to go off script here and just say that, this next call to action is an important one. We do it every week, but I just want to really emphasize it this week. If you enjoy the show, if you find value in what we're doing here at the Home Tech Podcast, I would ask you to please just take a couple of minutes, a really quick process to do. Go on to the podcast app, whatever podcast app you use, and leave us a positive review. Those definitely help more people find the show, and we're all about continuing to grow the home tech community. So if you have a few minutes to go leave us a positive review, we would really, really appreciate it.
So wait, this is what I can do real time, Jason. I can put in, since I have a little Ring camera there, I just went into the Ring app and I just took a screenshot of the murder work that I've been doing on my lawn.
Oh yeah, you're busy. Did you used to have grass there?
It was a mix of weeds and brown stuff. So
okay. It was supposed to be grass.
It was supposed to be grass. Yeah, I'm using this as like a test section to see how hard it is to resod your lawn. And it turns out it's pretty hard. Not something I want to do for the rest of my life. Yeah,
I got areas where I'm thinking about doing it. I'm glad you're being the guinea pig.
Yeah, it's not fun. Hire somebody. Hire a pro. Hire a pro. If we don't learn anything off our show here.
I got grass in places I don't want grass and I can't get it to stop. And then I got areas where I want grass and I can't get it to grow. That's my relationship with grass, pretty much.
I don't have a problem with things growing here because it's Florida and we have sun and rain, and that's pretty much all plants need to grow. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. It's just I've got with this big dirt pile that I have now, and now that I've taken, you have to rake up all the grass and everything and throw it away and then you can put the new seed down and get it going. But I have basically until Sunday before it starts raining again and washes all this dirt out into the street.
Oof.
Right. So that's my, and then I ran across, I don't know if you can see by my car there, the big white thing that's kind of beat up in the ground. That's the concrete pillar thing that I'm trying to take out that made me late for the show.
Yeah.
So it's
we better let you get back to work. Jonathan here in the chat room regarding my comment about grass says, sounds like the hair on my body. I could not agree more. Bald guy joke. I'm with you, Jonathan.
There we go.
That's funny. All right. Well, we better let you go and get back to work, Seth. Thanks for jumping on here and taking a break from your grand landscaping experiment.
I'm going to start my new landscaping podcast. It's called Do It For Me Landscaping. Oh man, this is awful. I can see how people like green thumbing things, but I'm not a fan. Not a fan of the artwork.
Yeah, I'm with you. Small doses.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the key. All right. Well, we'll let you go. Have a great weekend, Seth. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks to everybody listening in the chat live. Thanks very, very much, guys. And we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Take care.